So hey guys, welcome back to Ponderings from Palm Coast. I'm Mark Webb, and today I've asked Merrill Shapiro to join me because I want to have a robust conversation about some serious actions that are occurring in and around our public education here in Flagler County and the state. There's so much happening and going on. It's imperative that as we are holding our property tax assessments that are being paid starting this month, that you educate yourself and ask yourself, where is that money going? Where and how am I supporting the school system? Now, we all know that everyone has a vested interest in the success of education of our children, whether you have children or not. And there's no place that I'm aware of in this country that doesn't see the need of investing in young people's education as non-value. And even here in Flagler County, 80% roughly families in this county don't have children, but pay the equivalent property taxes that you and I do. And so I want to make sure we understand and that you try to get educated on where that money goes. Where and what are you getting for it? We can talk, and hopefully if we have time, we'll talk about the voucher system, because that's a whole nother conversation. But I asked Merrill to come in because there's been some efforts at the state level to change the curriculum or the views of what subject matter is going to be taught. Right. So Merrill, what is this Phoenix program that they're talking about?
It's a broad spectrum outline. By the way, I believe it expresses most of what's in Project 2025, or not. Much of what it says comes from out of Project 2025, and it's used to inject religion into schools and religious understanding. That the schools should help decide what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, and our abilities come from God, and there are all sorts of expressions like that in the document itself. But in the end, by the way, there's an expression of fascism in that it's going to decide what's quality art and what's not quality art, what's quality music, what's not quality music, and so on. It's really an attempt to put more statewide control, and this is a difficult challenge because already our schools are so controlled by Tallahassee that local people don't have much control, but to impose even more control and centralization. I don't think it's really binding, but it's certainly an interesting expression of what the far right wants our public schools to be.
And this is directed toward the public school system.
Absolutely.
So we have plethora of options for families to send their kids to school. You've got homeschool. Johnny's going to sit here in the living room and I'm going to teach him the best I can. Or you have private schools, which tend to be leaning more religious in nature. And then you have the charter schools, like Imagine and those kind of things. And then you have public schools. And the public schools in the past have always, at least from my memory, been more of a generic reading, writing, arithmetic type of experience. And now here in Florida, they're wanting to take the Project 2025, look it up, it's been out there for a while, and embed that into the curriculum in our public schools?
Well, certainly to embed the values of Project 2025 and the values that are being promoted by the far right. By the way, it applies to public schools, but it's very specific in saying that public funding of students should follow the student. So that if a student or parents want their student to go to a different school, we publicly still should spend money to support that school, no matter what that school teaches, and no matter
Unless it's a different religion than what they believe in, which is a whole nother conversation that we can
if you want to send your kid to a school that teaches them how to make bigger bombs to use in movie theaters and in shopping malls, we, the public, are going to wind up paying for it.
Right. So basically what you're saying is, like with the voucher system, that if they lump a dollar sign over a kid and say educating this kid's worth X number of dollars, and it doesn't matter where he goes, the state through the federal is going to support that education.
And it's not quite as linear as we think it is. That is to say, if it costs $10,000 to educate a student in the public schools, and that public school student then goes to a private school, that we save $10,000. That's not true, because the school bus drivers and the repairing the roof of the school or the superintendent's pay does not change when we move that student outside. We still have the same expenses. So you can't say, we're moving the student from a public school to a private school. See, we save the public schools $10,000. That's just not true.
Right, because as we learned that up in the Jacksonville school system, when the voucher system last year was changed and promoted by our governor, they had such an impact that they actually closed, due to lack of students, schools that they couldn't keep open, and even lost teachers that were not being funded. So remember, you're paying for this in your property taxes every year. So whether you think you're being touched or you don't care because you don't have a kid, you should, because the largest single cost of your property tax, and I have mine right here and I was counting the millage rates, comes from the school. And there's no relief from it. You can't homestead your school system. You can't get a VA military waiver. If you're a senior, you don't get a break from that either. And I'll remind you, if you look closely at the efforts of the property tax changes that have been talked about, and you pay attention, you will see that the school funding is not being touched. They may say they're going to get rid of your property taxes, and some of them they may, but the funding for fire, police, and schools will still be property taxed. So that's why it's important, and that's why I wanted to bring Merrill in here today, because education is important, and you need to get involved with your school districts, because unfortunately, they don't have a lot to say in what's happening at your state level when they make these changes. So within the Phoenix, you're telling me that it is a curriculum that the state Board of Education, whatever they call themselves, have approved it as a choice of curriculum that the public schools can follow.
I would. It's not just curriculum, but it's even broader than curriculum. But let me go back for just a moment, and it's typical of all of us who do not have children in the school system to say we're paying into the school system and we don't have children. That's not right. Well, the truth of the matter is that, and St. Johns County is a wonderful example, the better the schools, the higher the scores, the more effective the schools, the higher our property values are. The easier it is to sell our homes when it comes time to sell our homes. Real estate values are very closely tied, and there are lots of studies all over the country that point out that real estate values do depend highly on the quality of the school system.
Absolutely. And the education and the quality of the kids themselves.
You know what?
Having betterment for all of us.
We've all had the experience, I suspect, of going into a small shop where things are not so computerized and having a teenager or a 20-year-old that try to make change, where we give them a $10 bill for $8.17 worth of good, and they cannot figure out what the proper change is. And that's just an example. We want our mechanics to be able to go back and forth between metric and English systems of measurements and so many other things that require a quality education. So we all benefit from having educated students, and even on a national level. We want to compete in the space race. We want to compete in the modernization of our military. We want to compete in so many in medical sciences. Kids, we who do not have children in the school still pay taxes to make sure that we have the best and the brightest who go on and take care of those things.
You know, and just recently, our president claimed that we don't have the best and the brightest here in America anymore. And that's why we have to bring in, through the V1B program, talented people to make up, because is he actually saying our school systems are failing?
You can go again to the Phoenix Declaration that was just unanimously voted upon and approved by our school board and our state school board, that says many schools have lost their way. And I don't think that's correct. Our schools are very effective. And in fact, as you cited before we went on the air, there seems to be a flow from private schools and homeschooling, and people wake up and say, wait a second, the public schools are pretty good. I want my kid to go to the public school. Part of the issue is, of course, they receive vouchers, and what happens to that money? Yeah. And we have poor stewards on a state level, but stewards of our money. But in the end, public schools have proven over and over again to be quite superior. I'll use the word superior. There is, we talk about in my National Organization of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, we talk time to time about perceived valuation. You've heard me say this as well, Mark. And it goes back to my family. My parents were very friendly with somebody who ran a shoe store. One year he decided to put a pair of shoes in the front window on one side of the walkway into the store, a pair of shoes, and put a $75 price tag on it. And then took the exact same shoes and put the price tag on the other side of $100 on the same shoes. Well, people came in and they wanted a $100 shoe. And I said, why? Because, well, a $100 shoe must be better than a $75 shoe. And so a private school with a fancy price tag, people say the public schools are free. How much can they be worth? The private school, that's got a fancy tuition, that must be a much more effective school. But the truth is that's not the case. And the public schools truly are excellent, have gotten us, helped us win World War II, helped us win World War I, helped us win the space race and the Cold War. Public schools have proven to be part of the backbone of the strength of our country.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I wanted to share, and this was my view, you guys need to understand the state school board is appointed by our governor. They're not elected. And yet they set the policy for all the school boards of each county who have to follow it. You understand? You vote for a school board member of Palm Coast, of Flagler County, and that person sits there that you elect, and they have no authority to make any decisions of the school district that you just elected them to, because the governor appoints those people at Tallahassee that then tells the school boards what to do. So I want you to think about that a minute and understand the ramifications of when you think you have a say, you think you have an election, you think you have power, you don't.
Let me expand on that as well. So if you look specifically at Florida State School Board, I believe it has 7 members. Only one of them has any classroom or education experience. The others are lawyers, doctors, business people, and so on. And so they have no idea. In fact, I would challenge any of them to, off the top of their head, to provide a definition of what education is. I don't think they can tell you what education is.
Absolutely. And they love to say they want parents to have a voice. You hear it all the time. Moms for Liberty and all these other groups are trying to empower you, the parent, or you, the grandparent, you may be in that situation, to think that you have a voice, that you have a say or a control or understanding of what your child is being taught. You do not. It is smoke and mirrors. The example of this right now, you need to go and research and understand what this Phoenix program is, or what Project 2025, or what is this they're talking about, embedding a training area to talk about educating our kids on what communism is. And don't they already get in history class an explanation of what communism is?
Well, because that's, by the way, so they're very interested in this Phoenix Declaration of teaching right and wrong, but they don't want you to use examples of wrongs that we, the United States, have perpetrated, and limiting the black participation in the voting, enslaving blacks, not allowing women to vote, and so on. That will make us feel bad. So let's go to a foreign country and point at communism. That won't make the United States look bad, and we can say communism is bad. They need to have a straw man that they can dump on and say, this is evil, and what we have is good. And that's part of the problem. Yeah.
So, and I know you've been very involved, and still are to this day, the Flagler County School District, and I know that we've had, and you can find interviews with Jamie Ruddy and others that have shared that they're almost powerless to control from when your child starts school to what they're being taught. And I think it's important, and I felt really driven to have this conversation with you guys, with Merrill helping me to educate and understand that the school process itself, the educating of your children, is under severe attack here in Florida, and you don't even know it. You're not even aware of it. You pack up your child or your grandchild, backpack, and they go off to school, and you come back. You have no idea what they're learning or what they're being taught, and you need to inform yourself.
Okay. I would say that, interestingly, there is one area in which the county school board does have power and does have an important impact on our schools, and that is setting teacher salaries. And now that takes some guts on the part of a school board, because as we push for higher school salaries for our teachers to attract better teachers and more teachers, that means property taxes go up. But I urge people to play a mind game. Suppose, by the way, the starting salary of a Flagler County teacher now is $50,000. But by the way, as you move up the scale with experience, the increments are very, very small. So you're not going to go much further than the $50,000. But suppose we offered $100,000 as a starting salary to be a teacher in Flagler County schools. All of a sudden, students who were thinking about going into law, thinking about going into business, perhaps even thinking of going into medicine, say, wow, I can earn $100,000 in a teaching school. That looks a lot more attractive, and we have a higher level of teachers. Our teachers are very excellent as they are now, but we would go even higher, and particularly as far as the neighboring counties are concerned, people would say, wow, I might want to work in St. John's or in Volusia County or in Putnam County, but if I can start at $100,000 in Flagler County, that sounds great. Of course, the rub is, again, that that would call for an increase in our taxes, increasing that tax bill that you showed before, and that's not going to sit well with voters, and a school board is an elected office, and so people have a vested interest, they feel, in making sure we elect people who want to keep a cap on teacher pay.
So getting back to this suggested process, is there expectations that the teachers would be required to teach it or follow it? Are there penalties if a school board looks at it and says, yeah, that's just not who we are. That's not what we're going to do. Is there a choice?
It's currently not that specific, and there's no mechanism for enforcement necessarily. Although we do know that teachers, well, when a teacher in Alachua County posted that something like, "Oh, good, Charlie Kirk was shot. There's no more, his bigotry is gone," and she was challenged, and both on a state and local level, and the school board decided, and I don't know what the outcome was, to remove her. And we have had local teachers who have been a little bit more vociferous than usual on LGBTQ issues. She was removed from teaching in a school. So there is that kind of control. But if we continue in the direction we are going, and I do not hesitate at all to say that we are heading off into fascism if we're not already there. Yes, school board members, by the way, school board members have been replaced, just like county prosecutors and so on have been replaced by the governor and by the state government. That teachers are also in fear of their jobs if they exercise their free speech but express the wrong opinion.
Right. And you touched on the Charlie Kirk and the other information that you need to be aware of is there is a push to try to open up at the high school level. Turning Point USA has chapters at many of the colleges, which is a proper place for those kind of chapters. There's a Democratic chapter and a liberal chapter and Republican chapter at the college level. But in the past, there's been an attempt to remove those political or types of organizations. Yeah, you can join the chess club, but there's no Republican or Democratic chapter in the high school today. But now there's an effort through the state school board to open up to allow Turning Point USA chapters to be put in all the high schools. They know not what they're doing, and they describe it more of a choice. They don't see it as a political thing. That's scary. For me personally, that is scary. And I, for one, had taught my children critical thinking as a single dad for a short period of time. And my kids used to be latchkey kids. If you don't know that, I work full time. And when my kids were in junior high and high school, they would come home by themselves, come in, fix a snack, do their homework. And I taught them to be very resilient and critical thinking. Hopefully they would be smart enough to see that danger, but not every child's like that.
Yeah, there's that, but I might quibble over even whether Turning Point USA is appropriate for college campuses or any support. Do we want in our public schools here in Flagler County, in colleges, universities, or any place, an organization that tells you that if you're about to board a plane and discover that the pilot is black, you should get off the plane and wait till you find a white pilot? Do we want to support an organization that says that Jews are using their money to divide this country? Do we want to support an organization that says, and by the way, our local representative Randy Fine is a big fan of this, if you can't vote in English, if you don't have proficiency in English, you don't belong in this country. No matter whether it's colleges and universities or high schools or any place else, I believe that Turning Point expresses the worst of ideas and impresses it upon our young people, and we need to stand up against that.
Right. And we differ in the sense that I believe, and I've always felt, that at college and in universities, the exposure of things good and bad is a life lesson. And I love to use the old adage of, honey, don't touch the oven, it's hot. Some kids are going to walk over there and grab that oven
Yep.
to learn it's hot.
Okay.
And I think that at the university level, when it's the first time that a child or a young person has left the home of its environment, of culturally, religious, not religious, liberal, conservative, and they go off and they get surrounded by all of these other exposures, I see that as a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
And
no
I
question.
believe, like in my case, serving 20 years in the military, I walked in countries that didn't have the freedoms we had and couldn't speak out and whatever, and that affected me and how my views are. But at the high school level, I believe that there needs to be some type of boundaries of understanding how the exposure, because that exposure could expand to things we don't know and can control. Like we were talking about the Muslim, there are private schools in the state of Florida that are driven by and support the Muslim views of the world. And they are and have been receiving vouchers so far. There's an effort to pick and choose in Tallahassee and in the state that, no, if you're not a Christian-minded person, we don't want you to get that
right.
money. So, and I kind of laughingly said to some individuals recently, I said, well, great. So we're fully prepared to put a Democratic chapter in every high school in Flagler County. They lost their mind because they see that as attack on their own view.
Yeah.
All right, I won't do it if you don't do it. And that's the ebb and flow that we're experiencing now.
By the way, I would speak up on behalf of our Muslim brothers and sisters that the overwhelming majority of Muslims, by the way, what's the largest country in the world? What's the country in the world that has the largest Muslim population? Indonesia, not even Arab. But even Arab Muslims are good, peace-loving people, reasonable, and so on. They're not the terrorists that our state legislature would like us to believe that they
Right.
are. As far as controlling what is taught, and more importantly, controlling what our young people think, an interesting study came out in the past week that's a lesson for counties and the state as well in book banning. And of course, we want to ban books and decide not to. Well, first of all, of course, when you ban a book, many more people read it than if you just shut up and just let it stay in the library. But apparently, nationally, 25% of all high school students, and I may include middle school as well, are spending some of the time during the school day, and this comes up in the question of whether phones should be available to students during the school day, but certainly on their tablets and on their laptops, 25% of them are during the school day and during class time watching pornography. And so can you control, you think you can control what students think and so on, you can't. And that's not the idea. We don't want to exercise control. In fact, our goal is to graduate and have fully functioning human beings who can think for themselves and make up their own minds and not have the state and the government tell them what they should think.
Right. I guess that's why in Florida they want to allow 16-year-olds to have guns now, because they
Exactly,
think
yeah.
a 16-year-old is fully capable if they can drive a car.
Yeah, but not to read the Bluest Eye or not to read banned books.
You know.
But you know, have a gun. Yeah, absolutely. Have an an AR-15.
Whatever.
Sure.
It's you know, if they can drive a car, which is kills quite a few people. In fact, maybe one of the number one reasons people die, that we have to do that. But the importance of today's conversation at this time, as you sit down and you look at your tax forms and you look at the millage rate and you look and see where your money is going and how much of it is going to the school district. You need to be educated. You need to ask questions about what is happening there because there's very little voice available until you get next November to the voting booth. And that's what this is all about. Educate yourself to realize that, yes, it does matter who is sitting in Tallahassee because they choose the state school board. They put these things in place that trickle down and affect your youngest child as you send them off to school.
The Phoenix Declaration along those lines. Well, you know what? Let me start with reading the Bible. The art of biblical narrative demands that when we read a biblical narrative, we look for what's missing, not what's there. So what's missing? So if we read the Phoenix Declaration and look at what's missing is any reference to taxpayers. And taxpayers are the ones who we pay. I have facetiously, maybe semi-facetiously, maybe even more than semi-facetiously said that I support Moms for Liberty and other parental rights organizations having 100% say in our schools, as long as they're willing to pay for 100% of the cost of running our schools, which in Flagler County is on the order of $300 million with the operating and capital budget. If they want to come up with $300 million a year, they can have 100% say. But until they do, we the people, and that's what's missing from this document. We the people, we the citizens, we the taxpayers, we have to have a say in what goes on in our schools as well. And overwhelmingly, interestingly, taxpayers oppose book banning and oppose many of the ideas that are found in a document such as this and expressed by our school board in their desire to turn our classrooms into right-wing and overwhelmingly Christian powerhouses of imparting ideas to kids.
Right. And it's important for you to realize that when an elected official or someone of responsibility stands in front of the podium and says, I am giving parents the voice and the say of what happens in your local school, he's not telling you the truth. Or at least he's not talking to the larger group of parents that are listening. Absolutely, there's a need for a private school that can teach the children what the parents want. Hence, the development of private schools from 30 years ago where I don't like what the public schools. I want more of a Christian flavor. I want more of a control. They developed a private school. I applaud that. Yep. It's great. It's self-sustaining and it's self-sufficient. But it shouldn't be funded by my dollar.
Right, exactly.
They need to be funded by their own dollar. And every organization I know that's out there right now is fighting for your dollar because the federal government and the state government has decided, like with NPR and public radio, we don't like what they're saying, so we're going to take the money away. It's happening right now. These kind of things are happening today, and you need to be aware of it and educate yourself. And I wanted to touch on this because I was getting ready to go pay my property taxes, as I know all of us are that own homes. You need to be aware of what's going on there with that money.
Yeah, it's our money, public. I would take the stance, and I would urge all people to take the stance that public money belong in public schools. You want school choice, you can send your child to any number of private schools, but you need to do it the old-fashioned way, and that is pay for it yourself. Right. But I want to go back to something else you said about parents. While it may be true that parents know their children better than anything else, by the way, in some families with two working parents, kids spend more time with their teachers each day, waking hours with their teacher, than they do with their parents. But we have to confront the fact that parents are not often not very well trained in child development, child psychology, and certainly curriculum content. And I'll be happy to point to the overwhelming number of studies that show that the majority of parents even in Flagler County, the majority of parents are opposed to the teaching of Arabic numerals in our schools. So if you ask, are you for or against Arabic numerals? They'll say, 65% will say, I oppose the teaching of Arabic numerals in our school. Little do they understand that the numerals that we have right now are that you have on your odometer or your speedometer in your car, or the thermometer in your house, or the temperature gauge on your oven. That's Arabic numerals, but they don't know that.
Right.
And parents are not the best people. Teachers are highly trained, and they are highly experienced, and they have credentials, and they're supervised, and they develop their professionalism over a period of time. Parents, not necessarily so. We can often spot homeschooled kids, by the way, aside from the fact that their social adjustment is not much, because if you are in a classroom with 20 other students, you get to have to learn to get along with people you like and people you don't like. You don't necessarily have that in homeschool. But all you need to do is look at the way often homeschool students hold a pencil or a pen, and they don't do it the way certainly we were taught, and what might be considered the better way and a more effective way to hold a pencil, because parents are not trained teachers.
Right. And to let you know, in this upcoming budget that was just approved, Flagler County school system, the second largest expenditure behind teacher salaries, cost of the buses, maintenance of the schools, which is a huge chunk of their budget. $17 million was put aside, mandated by the state, for the school voucher program to allow students choices, to spend your money. Recently, our superintendent admitted that well over 100, and this was at the beginning of school, it's probably higher now,
Yep.
in Flagler County had received the vouchers to go to an alternative choice and are now in your public school without any mechanism to reimburse you or the school district the money. So two things happen there. One, the state or the Flagler County lost the money for that student at the beginning of the year, which is accountable by attendance. How many students is how much the state pays. And secondly, thousands of dollars were paid to the family to have that kid go to a private school, a voucher-driven school, which he's no longer using, with no way to get that back. Is that something you want to tolerate? Is that something you accept? That your money's being misused? And there's no, the only people, as Representative Leaks was saying, yeah, that's a hole in our process. We need to fix it when we get back. That's a hole in our process. A family of four got $30,000 to hold their kids back, and now they're going to the high school up in Kansas and don't have to pay the money back. I personally got a problem with that. So
it's up to, I understand, over 40,000 students across the state are receiving voucher money, and so there's all this that are going to public schools. There's this missing money. Where's the money? Why do we have to ask, and let's name the name, Tom Leak, our state senator, and Sam Greco, our state representative, why do we need to ask them to look into this? Why isn't somebody minding the store while everybody comes in and takes things off the shelves and leaves without paying, or picking our pockets, or taking our tax money? It's struggle enough for many Flagler County to pay for food and electricity and house insurance, and water is always a burden. Mortgage payments or rent. Why does somebody not look into what's going
Well,
on
ain't
with
that
our
what
tax
the
money. Yeah.
maybe that's what the Doge system was supposed to be for?
Well, that's what's interesting is Doge comes into local government in town and says, you're misspending, you're misspending, you're misspending. If you stand up, if a government official, as we had with in Orlando, the mayor of Orange County, stood up and says, who's looking at the state waste? You're
Right.
concerned with us. The state is wasting so much money, particularly on these students who receive vouchers and then attend public schools anyway.
Right. So, hey, Doge should be looking at our school system because we're all paying it. You're going to be paying it in the next month or two. Well, Merrill, any final thoughts? We could go on for hours. The goal of today's conversation was to get you to be aware as you pay your property taxes that you're paying probably the majority of your taxes going to the school system, which there are ongoing issues you need to be aware of where your money's going, what kind of curriculum or goal or education direction. It's just so much that's happening.
Yeah, there is one line in the Phoenix Declaration that I would quote. It actually quotes Thomas Jefferson, and I would urge everyone to pay important attention. And that is that for a success of a democracy, we need an educated electorate. That is, all of you who are watching and listening to this podcast need to be educated. And in fact, I think if you're choosing to listen to this, you're pretty well educated. So I need you to walk out your front door, go to the house or apartment on your right, and go to the house and apartment on your left, the one across and the one adjacent to the one across the street, and educate them. Educate your family, educate your friends as to what's going on. Shenanigans in Tallahassee can take place because we don't pay enough attention. I need to rise up, pay attention, and raise our voices on behalf of the good and welfare of our entire community.
Absolutely. And you guys hear that from me all the time. We are strong in numbers, but weak in a message to let people know what's happening in the world around you. That's why I do this podcast. That's why Merrill does his podcast, Conversations in American Democracy. It's an alternative source of information. Don't listen to us. Check it out for yourself. Take 5 minutes and Google the Phoenix Project or Project 2025 or ask questions and get involved. And remember, you have the control of who's sitting in Tallahassee, who's sitting on the board, and how things are if you choose to use it. So guys, I want to thank you so much for coming and speaking, listening to us today. Remember to subscribe and like and share with others this podcast because I'm enjoying bringing this to you. So with that, I'll catch you next time. Later.